The Despicable Me franchise is the most successful and popular animated movie franchise. That's not an opinion, that's statistically true. And the Minions have now been forever cemented into pop culture. The series boasts an impressive 4 movies, along with 2 spin-offs, and a chunk of extra media. Beneath all of these movies, there is a long, winding history. And today, I'm going to talk about it. But first, I have to do a bunch of presidential stuff. Fighting inflation and lowering taxes is hard. If only I had a bunch of little yellow things to help me with it. Oh, wait a second. We've all seen at least one of these movies, and if you haven't, you're definitely familiar with these stupid yellow cylinders. Created, most likely for the sole purpose of merchandise, the Minions. They have been everywhere since their debut in Despicable Me in 2010. Our story begins in the beginning, the actual beginning of time. The Minions began from single-celled organisms and eventually evolved. The first thing the Minions did was look for a boss. The life goal of the Minions is to serve the most evil person ever. Well, seeing as there was no person that could have been evil, they first followed the apex predators in the waters. And since there is always a bigger fish, they served multiple. Once they became bipedal, they first served a T-Rex, and shortly after, directly caused his death. When cavemen finally came into the picture, they served one of them, but they once again directly caused his death. The Minions made it to Egypt and served a pharaoh, but they also killed him. Then they served Dracula, killed him too. Skip a couple hundred years, and they served Napoleon. The Minions potentially kill Napoleon. They tilt a cannon toward him, but that's not how he really went out, so unless they're rewriting history in the movie, the Minions probably were just fired. After Napoleon, the Minions hide in an ice cave for roughly 150 years. They are really extremely depressed that they cannot find a boss. Now, it's the 1960s, conveniently leaving out the 1930s and 1940s where they could have perhaps had the most villainous villain, but, you know, whatever. Before we get to the main part of the 60s, it's important to note that Gru and his twin brother Drew are born sometime during this decade. There are multiple different birthdays given in the movies, and this is a plot hole. So later on, if it seems confusing, it's because it is. It's 1968. 3 Minions, Kevin, Stuart, and Bob, leave the ice cave and travel to New York. They hear about a thing called VillainCon, where all of the villains from around the world meet up. They hitchhike and meet tons of cool villains. One of them is a man named Joseph Nefario. He's selling a freeze ray. At his table is a young Gru. These characters are not important yet. The Minions win a competition to be the henchmen of the supervillain Scarlet Overkill. She wants the queen's crown. Anyway, one thing leads to another. Bob steals the sword and the stone. There's some rule that now he is king. I don't know how that stuff works over there in Britain. Bob quickly abdicates the throne to Scarlet Overkill, and now she abandons the Minions. Using a bunch of gadgets and stuff, Kevin becomes a giant, and all of the other Minions in the ice cave come to the rescue. Scarlet Overkill and her husband Herb are suddenly frozen by a young Gru, who bought Nefario's freeze ray. So Gru is this kid. He's also the main character of the entire franchise. He's a kid in this movie, but he will grow up to be one of the baddest villains around. After this event, the Minions nonstop bugged Gru to have him as their boss. I don't know what year this really happened, but it was shortly after. Now in 1976, Gru is supposedly 11, even though he looks exactly like he did at 3, 8 years ago. There is this group called the Vicious Six. These guys are lame, and they steal this amulet thing and they betray their oldest member, Wild Knuckles. Now with only 5 members of the Vicious Six, they have to hire someone new. As Gru looks up to them, he applies, gets an interview, denied, and then steals the precious amulet. It's at this point in the story when we realize Universal or Illumination, whoever the top executives are, told the team, we need another Minions movie. The first one made us $1 billion, we need that again. The story completely devolves into madness. Gru gets kidnapped by Wild Knuckles. Otto, one of the Minions, gives away the amulet for a pet rock, so he has to get it back, and he does it on a toy tricycle. Kevin, Stuart, and Bob see Gru get kidnapped, so they try to rescue him, but instead actually learn Kung Fu, and then the Vicious Six are having their own story, I guess, searching for Gru. Gru ends up making friends with Wild Knuckles, and they rob the Bank of Evil. A worker there is Mr. Perkins, the father of a future character, Vector. Anyway, it feels like a very random and clustered movie, and the thing is at the end, doesn't really all come together that nicely. The Vicious Six turn into giant animal beasts at the end, which, you know what? No, I'm not gonna hate on this movie anymore. Well, I mean, I already did a bit. This whole thing where they turn into mythical creatures or whatever felt not very Despicable Me-y. It's a whatever ending. It ends how you would expect it to. The Vicious Six are arrested by the AVL, or the Anti-Villain League. I'll talk about them later, but their name definitely says it all. The most important thing in this movie is Gru's relationship with Dr. Nefario. Nefario owned a record store and helps Gru out and gives him another weapon. At the end of the movie, his store shuts down and Gru hires Nefario. After this scene, Gru and Nefario will work together for the next many decades. Nefario somewhat serves as a sidekick to Gru, but also as a mentor. Into the next decade, the 80s, the TV show Evil Brat airs. It stars child actor Balthazar Brat. After Brat hit puberty, the show lost popularity and was canceled. Brat wasn't too happy about this and started scheming. This might sound random, me just putting this in here, but we're gonna now have to pause the Brat story for a minute. Also in the 80s, Gru graduated from his school of villainy. He also won the talent show there, stealing an act from another student, Maxime Lamal. Okay, this was once again putting just a little bit of information out there, but I have to pause his story too. But remember both Brat and Maxime. Skipping forward in time, many decades, Despicable Me, the first movie. Oh wait, no, not quite yet. Despicable Me, the game. You guys remember this piece of beautiful polygons. This is where Gru first truly met Vector, the main villain of the first movie. He surprisingly is a really good villain as well, even though he's kind of portrayed as a loser. Gru and Vector fight and they want to steal the moon. Look, this game is really choppy and barely contributes to the overall story, but at least we know Gru first meets Vector. And remember how I mentioned Mr. Perkins is Vector's dad? This is that same Vector. Now on to Despicable Me. Vector steals the Great Pyramid of Giza and puts all other villains to shame. Gru now has to top it and steal the moon. He adopts some girls hoping to use them against Vector, Margot, Edith, and Agnes. Gru very quickly becomes attached to them. Vector kidnaps them and will exchange them for the moon. Gru uses a shrink ray and gives Vector the tiny little moon. But Vector, being a villain, takes it without giving the girls. Also turns out, the bigger the object, the shrink effect lasts less. So since the moon is really big, it's going to go back to its normal size quickly. Gru and the minions quickly save the girls, and the moon begins to expand in Vector's ship. It gets so big, it destroys Vector's ship, and it goes back into space where it belongs. However, Vector is stuck on it. There's also a minion up there from a previous scene. Now that the movie's done, you would naturally assume Despicable Me 2 is the next thing in the timeline. Wrong. There have been many shorts and mini-movies released alongside the movies and other Illumination movies, and one of them released in 2023, 13 years after the original movie. We pick back up on the moon with Vector, also that minion in space. He's important too. Vector attempts multiple things to get back to Earth, but all of them fail. He also refuses to work with the minion in space. The other minions from Earth fly into space to come and rescue the minion. They offer for Vector to come with, but he doesn't even pay attention. The minions leave in the ship, and Vector has attached a bunch of rockets to the original 1969 spacecraft and has launched it towards Earth. The two ships collide and end up on Mars. There they meet a little Martian alien. They remain stuck here for a while. Now, Despicable Me 2. There's a new villain in town, El Macho, and he has stolen this serum that makes the recipient crazy, purple, and evil. Gru has given up his villainy to raise the girls. The AVL, or Anti-Villain League, remember when I mentioned them in the 70s? Pretty much just an organization to fight the bad guys. Not that complicated. They want Gru to work for them because, as the best villain, he can defeat the new up-and-coming best villain, but he denies it. So El Macho actually died many years ago, but you see, he really didn't, and it was a whole stunt thing and he faked his death. Dr. Nefario also quits working with Gru to work for another villain, which then prompts Gru to join the AVL. This girl Lucy, Gru's AVL partner, is quickly becoming a new main character. She's all nice, kinda clumsy, and like 8 feet tall. El Macho has been kidnapping minions and using the serum on them, making them become crazy, evil, and purple. I may be looking at this from a cynical point of view, but I feel like this plot point was done for merchandise. The minions were so profitable, why not make a new variant? Turns out Dr. Nefario went to work for El Macho. Gru, Lucy, and the very few remaining minions fight El Macho and the mutated minions. Dr. Nefario comes up with an antidote, and the minions are saved. El Macho mutates himself, and then he's defeated, and then finally Gru and Lucy get married after 147 dates. The third sequel, Despicable Me 3. You know what they say about the third movie in a series. I don't know if they have a phrase, but they are usually not the best thing. At least typically. This movie gets the job done, but it's definitely not a work of art. Silas Ramsbottom, a character that I have not mentioned yet, but he was in the last movie. He is head of the AVL, and he retires. And a new lady comes in to take his place, Valerie Da Vinci. She fires Gru and Lucy after they somewhat failed a mission. They were supposed to retrieve a diamond stolen by Balthazar Bratt. Remember that guy? He had the 80s show that was canceled. He is now an 80s themed supervillain. Gru got the diamond back, but didn't capture Bratt, and Da Vinci thought he should've. Gru refuses to become a supervillain again. Dr. Nefario is frozen in carbonite and is not in this movie. They ran out of story for him. Surprise! A butler arrives and invites Gru to his very wealthy, long-lost brother's house. Their parents were divorced, and each one got a kid. This brother is Drew, a much more dumb and clumsy Gru. Drew reveals their father was a supervillain, and Drew wants Gru to teach him how to become a villain. Gru doesn't want to. Bratt re-steals that diamond. Gru and Drew go to steal it, but Gru secretly wants to steal it to give it back to the AVL to get his job back, not to be a villain. Gru and Drew steal the diamond back, but Drew is mad at Gru for lying about his intentions. Gru then disowns Drew. Is Gru and Drew getting as repetitive for you as it is me? Bratt steals the diamond back again, along with the girls. Gru, Drew, and Lucy work together, leaving their differences behind and rescue the girls. Where have the minions been this whole time? Oh yeah, in prison. They got their own B-story, but they kinda sidelined them for this movie. They defeat Bratt and are reinstated into the AVL. After this movie, Drew is gone. So there was pretty much no story progress made at all. Now, the fourth movie. Not surprising, this was god-awful. I gotta sit and whine for a second, okay? How does this stuff get made? Who approved this and was like, yeah, this is a good sequel to Despicable Me? That question isn't asked. What is asked is, how much money can this make? Gru goes to his class reunion. There, his old classmate, Maxime Lamal, remember I mentioned him, wins the Best Student Award or whatever it was for. There's also some favoritism because Principal Ubelschlecht, I'm pretty sure I said that wrong, favorites him. Maxime has an obsession with cockroaches and turned himself into one. Okay, that is such a weird story. After Maxime wins the award, Gru reveals himself as an AVL agent and arrests him. Days later, Ramsbottom comes out of retirement. Yeah, that was a pointless story in the last movie. He tells the Gru family that they must be sequestered because Maxime has escaped and vowed vengeance. Gru, Lucy, and the three girls, three minions, and oh yeah, their new child, Gru Jr., are uprooted and moved to a ritzy neighborhood. The remaining minions are taken to the AVL HQ, and 5 of them are selected to become superheroes, called Mega Minions. This was totally done for story purposes, right? Not just to use it in marketing and trailers and merch, and then be in the movie for 30 seconds? No, they wouldn't do that. There's a whole section about the family getting used to their new life, and their neighbor Poppy, a young girl who somehow recognizes Gru and blackmails him into kidnapping his old school's badger mascot. The same dude that stole the moon is gonna get blackmailed by a little girl. Sure. Gru and Poppy steal the badger and get caught by Principal Ubel whatever, and she calls Maxime. He shows up with his cockroachiness and turns Gru Jr. into a cockroach, and then Gru Jr. beats Maxime. Oh yeah, the Mega Minions show up at the end and don't do anything. They return home and Dr. Nefario fixes Gru Jr. Oh hey, Dr. Nefario. What an iconic 5 seconds in this movie. Second movie in a row where he has absolutely no screen time. At the end of the movie, Gru goes to the AVL prison to talk with Maxime. We then proceed into the most forced scene ever, a quote-unquote sing-off. It makes absolutely no sense. Gru and Maxime sing Everybody Wants to Rule the World to all of the other prisoners. Vector, who somehow got off Mars, Mr. Perkins, El Macho, Bratt, the Vicious Six, who should be much older than what they are. It's been 35 years since they were arrested, and they look nearly identical. Even worse, Scarlet and Herb Overkill are here. Yeah, they have a bit of gray hair and maybe some wrinkles, but keep in mind, they are the same age as Dr. Nefario. Here's how Overkill and Nefario looked in the 60s, and now in the 2010s. I guess prison does wonders for the body. These two are in their 90s right here. Yeah, sure looks like it. The Mega Minions and other minions break into the prison and listen to the song too, and they give Poppy a little singing portion and other little cutaways. This is so random. I've seen speculation that this is the series' conclusion, and they just wanted to give a little callback to the old villains and stuff. There is no way this is the end of the series. This franchise makes way too much money. This is an okay movie, but it is a terrible Despicable Me movie. Now the movies are done, but there's still more. There's another game, Minion Rush, the Endless Runner mobile game. Most people of my generation has probably played it. I don't think it's probably too popular now. It is supposed to be canon, but there's also lots of inconsistencies. It gives us 2 new villains, exclusive to this game, Mina and Villaintriloquist, and they are still exclusive to this game as far as I know. Vector and El Macho also appear, with more villains slated to join the game, and obviously Vector is stuck on Mars, and El Macho is in prison, so how are they out chasing minions? That is, assuming this takes place before Despicable Me 4. Obviously there's excuses like they escaped or whatever, but honestly I'm deeming Minion Rush non-canon as it creates too many plot holes. The only way it could truly make sense is if it's after number 4 and they have all escaped. There's tons of other shorts I should mention as well. Most of them revolve around the Minions, obviously, and they take place during or between the movies. There really isn't much substance to them. However, there is a series of shorts called Saturday Morning Minions. They are 2D, and they are like 30 seconds each. I'm calling this series non-canon as well, because, I mean, look what this show has to offer. They also go on vacation and stuff, so it's possible it's between movies or before Despicable Me 1 or after number 4. I think it's kind of up in the air. There was another game called Minions Paradise, and it was a town builder. The Minions are on a cruise ship and they shipwreck and survive on a little island. I'm not gonna say it's non-canon because it too is very feasible that it's between the movies. Okay, now that's about it. This franchise has 2 great movies, 2 mediocre ones, and 2 long, drawn-out, awful ones. But I'm not going to tell you which ones go in those categories, so that's for you to decide. It's an iconic and pretty great franchise, and I don't want to dog on it too much, but just like every franchise, it's getting milked. So make sure you subscribe because that would be pretty cool.